Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. And I wish I could say that in French as well, but I'm very limited. I know bonjour. That's about it. But nice to see you all. I noticed that in the introduction, inshallah is the same in both English and French. My daughters, I have to share this with you. My daughters are growing up. You know, whenever they would ask my wife for something, you know, an ice cream cone or let's go to the store or something, she would always say, inshallah, inshallah. And so after a while, whenever she used to say that, like, Mommy, can we get an ice cream cone? And she would say, inshallah. They'd always go, why not? All right. Well, but that's sort of a little bit of the subject that I want to talk about today. And that is about raising Muslim children in the United States of America and Canada, and some of the difficulties involved with that. So this is one of my most unpleasant lectures to deliver. And tomorrow I get to deliver, talk about something that I enjoy talking about much more. But I think it's an important topic. But bear in mind that I really don't know much about the Canadian Muslim scene. I'm much more familiar with the American Muslim scene. And much of what I might say today may not exactly apply to things in Canada, in particular in Quebec. So don't get angry at me if what I say, is not such a big issue here. Well, I'm basically sharing with you the difficulties and problems that I believe we encounter more primarily in the United States with raising our children. All right? Did you follow that? Okay. But if I were to ask you, any of you, even those of you who have some experience with the American, and by American I mean Canadian or the United States, or both communities, Muslim communities, if I were to ask you, where do most of the Muslims, citizens and permanent residents in North America come from? I'd be sure if I went throughout this audience and asked that question, I'd get a variety of answers. If you visited Silicon Valley in California, you would certainly say, oh, India and Pakistan. I've actually tried that in that area. And that's almost everybody says, oh yeah, most of the American Muslims, permanent residents and citizens are from India and Pakistan. If I asked you that in northern St. Louis, you would probably say, well, Eastern Europe, Bosnia, and some of the other Balkan countries. If I asked that same question in Kansas City, people familiar with the Kansas City community would say, oh, the Arab world, and so forth and so on. If I asked you in Southwest San Francisco, you would say, oh, the Fiji Islands. But the common denominator, I think, or maybe the least common multiplier, it's hard to say, got to think about that for a second. But the common denominator to all those answers, I think, is that if you ask most people that have some knowledge of the American Muslim community, and if you ask them where do most of the citizens and permanent residents come from, the answer would be overseas. The answer would be they're immigrants. But that cannot possibly be the case. And I want to explain to you why. Let's just take the American scene. The United States scene. In the United States, the estimates are that there are somewhere between, 2 million and 8 million. Now the estimates by the Muslim community are up to 10 million, 11 million. Escalating very fast. But the estimates vary to how many Muslim permanent residents and citizens live in America, because the census doesn't record that data. But the most moderate estimates, and the ones we'll take it as sort of a median estimate, is 5 million. Let's say there are 5 million Muslim permanent residents and citizens in the United States of America. So let's try to figure out just sort of roughly how many of those are from overseas. Well, during the 50s and 60s and 70s, and even thereafter, there was a massive, large-scale conversion to Islam in America. Many, many African-American brothers and sisters first went through the Nation of Islam. Not all of them did, but that was the majority. Embraced the Nation of Islam's teachings under Elijah Muhammad, but the great majority of those brothers and sisters followed the same path blazed by Malcolm X and Warith Muhammad and came over to mainstream Islam. Now, at the height of the Nation of Islam, when Malcolm X was recruiting so successfully, they had 1 million members, 1 million on their membership list. Now, most of those brothers and sisters eventually came over to mainstream Islam, and then there's been a steady influx of Muslims from that same community, the African American community, ever since. We could be sure that there are somewhere in the neighborhood, at least, of 1 million African American converts to Islam in America. The majority of them came through the Nation of Islam experience, but certainly not all. So right there you have 1 million homegrown American Muslims. But in the 70s and 80s and 90s and since, we've had quite a few converts from other ethnicities in America, a steady trickle, as they said in the Time magazine article. Time magazine article estimated back in the early 80s that there were somewhere near 5,000 converts per year from other ethnicities. Well, that's been 30 years since, so that's another 150,000 converts at least, and the rate of conversion has been increasing. So, but let's just say 1 million, 1.2 million converts to Islam in America, and a lot of researchers, non-Muslim researchers, think that's a low estimate. But let's take that as an estimate. 1.2 million, just to be on the conservative side, 1 million converts. So that's already a significant number of homegrown American Muslims. But now, let's count the children. The children, those who are born in the United States but of Muslim parentage. Now, Muslims started immigrating to the United States. There were big waves back in the early 1900s and around 1950. But the most recent wave of immigration started in 1970, 80, 90, 2000, up till now, the last 50 years. So by now there should be second and third generation, even fourth generation Muslims in America from that latest wave of immigration. Now the average Muslim in America lives in a family. The average Muslim family in America has what size? What do you think the average size is? Well, the average American family is 4.25 people. But Muslim families tend to have more children than the national demographic, and I think if we said 3, that would really be a low estimate for the number of children in the average American Muslim family. I have 3 children. We have one of the smallest families in the Muslim community in Lawrence. So let's just say 3 children. 3 children in a family of 5. That's 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5 members born in the USA. Now, there are 5 million Muslims in America. 3/5 of them are probably descendants of Muslims born in the USA, not counting later generations. 3/5 of 5 million is 3 million. Throw back in the lowball estimate of 1 million American converts. 3 million plus 1 million is 4 million. 4 million out of 5 million is 80%. But I can guarantee you, if you go to any masjid in America, almost any Friday prayer, or any Muslim function in America, I defy you to find anywhere near 80% or even 60%, maybe my estimate is high, or 50% or 40%, even 10%. I defy you to find anywhere near that kind of percentage representation. Most masjids in America, you go to the Friday prayer. I don't know how it is here in Canada, but in the United States, you go to the Friday prayer, you'll be lucky if you find a handful of second or third or fourth generation Muslims in attendance. Lawrence, Kansas, we're in the middle of the country, not too far from Kansas City, which has a sizable Muslim community. Lawrence itself is estimated to have 2,000 to 3,000 Muslim permanent residents and citizens. If you go to the Friday prayer in Lawrence, and we have a large number of children up on campus, students on campus that have Muslim parents in different parts of the country. You know how many of those kids come to the Friday prayer in Lawrence, Kansas? You could usually count them on one hand.